I'm Julia Davis, a film major who stumbled into the business world with no experience in 2006. I was able to fail enough to learn how to run a seven-figure business and have provided consulting services to over 200 individually owned companies. Through this podcast, I hope to provide some perspective on the growth and grit it takes to accomplish big goals and share some hard lessons I've had to learn along the way. Today, I'm going to talk about something called the Dunning-Kruger Effect, which is the thought pattern you go through when you start something new. So if you can imagine two lines, one going up and one going to the side, I'm going to try to do a screen share here so you can see what I'm talking about. But as we dive into a little bit more business practice and as you're developing people, you'll realize that most people go through this level of learning. You do this and you've done this your whole life, probably many times when you've learned something new, but probably just didn't know what it was called or how to identify it. So I'm going to pull up a little bit of a diagram here that I found online to share. And this is essentially what the Dunning-Kruger effect is. So on this bottom plane here, it's the competence level, which means knowledge and what you know. And up here is the confidence level. So this is low confidence to high confidence. So when you start something new, you're right here. This is what they call the peak of Mount Stupid. And why they call it that is because you're kind of like naively excited about a process or something that's new. So the peak of Mount Stupid is when you start something new and your knowledge is low, but your enthusiasm and your confidence is really, really high. This is when people make a lot of dumb mistakes. It would be like when you learn how to drive and you're like, oh my gosh, driving is going to be so fun. I'm going to get in the car. It's going to be great. There's not much to learn. You just put gas and brake. It's like, that's all. And you're at the peak of Mount Stupid. Like, you're like, there's really nothing I have to, I mean, I've been watching people drive my whole life. So when you start something new, whether it's in a career or it's in life learning something, you're usually always like blissfully ignorant. You're like, this is exciting. This is new. And if you weren't that way, you probably would never start new stuff. So it's probably like a mechanism that we have to just be excited about new things. So that's where you are when you first start. You're low knowledge, high confidence, which is scary because then you start to do things and make decisions maybe that aren't great, right? Can you imagine putting like a 12-year-old behind the wheel of a car and just being like, hey, yeah, go for it, drive? That would make no sense. But that's kind of like the confidence some people have. They're like, I can do that. Like, well, maybe not. So what happens after that? So once you realize, like, let's say you're 16 and you're learning how to drive, we'll stick with that analogy. Then you start going through driver's ed and you realize, like, whoa, there is a lot to learn here. There's signs I have to memorize. How do I need to brake to 100 feet before the stop sign? I need to pay attention to hospitals and railroad crossings and pedestrians and people on bikes and motorcycles and all these different things that you didn't think of. And then you imagine like merging onto a highway and how scary that is. So now you start to like freak out, right? And this is what people do in business too, is they start really confident. They're like, this is going to be fun. And then they realize all the things that they're missing and that they have to learn. A lot of it is self-development that people have to do. And all of a sudden their confidence starts to go down as their knowledge starts to increase of what's needed or necessary for the job. So the knowledge is going up of what you need to do. And then your confidence is taking a big a big slide down south. And that next section on that chart is called the Valley of Despair. So if we go back to the chart and look at it for a second, you'll see in that bottom little section there, right underneath the peak of Mount Stupid, this is called the Valley of Despair. And this, I think from right here to about right here, if you guys can see my little cursor, this is the stage where most people quit stuff because it gets really challenging. And the Valley of Despair is different lengths for different people. So some people stay in this Valley of Despair, in this part of the Dunning-Kruger effect for a very long time because they're just kind of like wallowing in self-pity, or they're like, this is too much, and they start to like spiral out of control. So that Valley of Despair can be as long or as short as you make it, but that's where a lot of people quit. A lot of people quit new things, whether it's a hobby or it's a sport or it's like going to the gym, your your New Year's resolution or whatever, or it's like a diet or whatever. Like once people realize like this is going to be harder than I thought and take more work and energy, and they start to go down into that valley of despair, like, on that cycle down, they just jump. They just jump right off the Dunning-Kruger. They're like, "I'm not doing this. I'm gonna do something different." Or in the valley of despair, they realize how much work it's gonna take to climb back up, and they're like, "I'm out." Or as they climb, they realize, like, "I don't have time for this," and they ditch it as well. So that's probably the most dangerous part in this curve is that little in between that valley that, like, if you drew a line over straight across, that would be like the quitting zone, I call it. So how do you get out of the valley of despair? You guys, there is no easy way out of this. It's just time and effort. Like, it's just relentless amount of time. Like, you just have to practice and practice and practice. The only way to build a skill and become good at something is doing it all the time. So, the way out of that valley is through concentrated practice and doing it over and over and over and over again. So, just like driver's ed, when you're learning how to drive, the more times you drive and the more times you do it, the more confident you become. And I'm certain that most people who are listening to this probably drive places and they're like, I don't even know how I got here. Like, I got in my car, I pressed the gas, I took turns that I do every day. And if you drive to the same office every morning or the same grocery store or whatever it is, you're like, I don't even know, like, I don't even remember passing the things I normally pass. You just spaced out the entire time because you've done it so much. So you're no longer having to use all that energy to think. You're just doing it. So that's the way out of the valley, unfortunately, is through a lot of time and a lot of practice. And this looks different for every person because some people come into industries or sports or hobbies with skills. They come in and they have great hand-eye coordination. They come in and they have height for their advantage, or they come in and they have sales training background, or they've managed people before, or whatever it is. So that valley of despair might look different for that person than somebody else, like myself, who came into a sales industry with no experience. I was in that valley of despair for 5+ months of training because I just didn't understand like how to lead people. I had to learn that through a lot of mistakes. So whatever it is for you, like, try not to get discouraged, but figure out who's better than you at that job and just ask them questions or get books to help you or listen to podcasts or do something to try to get yourself out of that valley quicker. If you're thinking about driving, you're with a teacher, so they're helping you learn that. If you're with your 16-year-old buddies, the chances of you learning how to drive better are very low versus when you're with your parents who've driven 20, 30, 40 years, right? So, um, that's really, really important is to surround yourself with people who have the knowledge that you want and have been in that valley and gotten out of it. But also self-discovery and self-work is really important in that valley too. So that's kind of how you branch out of there. So then what's next after the valley of despair? We go back to the chart. We're on the slope of enlightenment. So slope of enlightenment means like, okay, now I'm starting to understand what I need to do in order to be good at this. So you can start to be consistent with habits. The biggest pitfall here in the slope of enlightenment is when people get a little bit too confident. This spikes up real high again, and then they start to make silly mistakes. Or they start to become very inconsistent, where they just decide not to do what they're supposed to do for a day, or they they don't put in the type of effort that needs to happen, and they just assume it's gonna continue on without the practice. So slope of enlightenment can be a place where people fall off if they're not consistently having good habits every day. And then after that is this plateau of sustainability. This is where people are the most bored, which is really interesting because it's, as soon as you're sustainable and you can do something confidently, because now you're kind of an expert, right? You're a guru, you're an expert here, and your confidence is high. You're like, I know I can do this. I'm really good at this. It can be scary because your ego could take over slightly, or you're really bored, so then you wanna start something new. A lot of people job hop for that reason. So when people start a new job, or, they change jobs, they're doing that because they're just chasing that enthusiasm for that first peak, right? So the emotions that go along with each of these things is like excitement is first, right? That's the peak of Mount Stupid. It's like blissfully ignorant. You're just so excited. And then you start to become like overwhelmed on that slope down. And in the valley of despair, that's when like fear, worry, can I do this? Like if you imagine like a little voice in your head questioning everything, every decision you've ever made, that's what's happening in that valley. And then at that slope, you're kind of learning, okay, I have to be consistent in order to do this well. And that's when like expertise is built because you're committed to the goal. So like commitment needs to happen in that slope of enlightenment. And then when you get to that sustainability piece, that's really when boredom hits and you know you're good because you can drive from your house to your office and not even think about it. Like you're really good, but your car isn't exciting anymore. And some people are like, I need a new car to make myself excited again. I need new seat covers. I need a new radio. I need new whatever, right? And you dress it up to like get excited. Some people change careers like that, where they're like, I've mastered everything in this career. I'm going to do this other thing. When if they just would stick with it and grow really far, they could be unbelievable in some cases, not every case, but it's just something to think about. So, as you're starting something new, understand that that pattern is very normal. It's been around for years. This is not a theory I created. This is something that's been, I mean, search Dunning-Kruger effect. You'll see all the designs come up for that. It's a well known psychology graph. Um, but it's good to know because some people are like, man, am I the only one who's struggled here? Am I the only person that's ever been challenged in this type of career? Or when am I going to become good at this? And you're thinking about that kind of stuff when in reality, everybody goes through the same stuff. Everyone's blissfully ignorant, thinks they're better than they are. Then they crash and burn, right? And then how you handle that crash and burn says a lot about your character. Some people just immediately exit. Some people are like, okay, I get it. This is a career that I still want. So I'm going to continue to push forward. And they get to the slope of enlightenment. And some people get to that expertise category and quit there. And other people are like, okay, I'm going to hang out here for a minute and see what I can do and develop. And that's when people become really, really good at things. So as you're going through this, understand that this is normal. How you get out of that valley is who you associate with. Get with people who know what they're doing. Read books on it. Develop skills and leadership. Whatever you need to do to be able to push yourself out of that slope, into that slope of enlightenment, up to that plateau of sustainability, so that you can really create something for yourself. If you want more tips on this stuff, you can follow me on Instagram at julia.bizstories, or you can find me, on the YouTube channel on my Growth and Grit podcast and listen to past stories of people who have done this, who have gone through all of these transitions, and you can listen to their stories so that you can feel not alone in your journey and realize you might be on to greatness if you just stick with it. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys, and we'll talk to you in a few weeks. Every week on the Growth and Grit podcast, we bring you real stories and practical tools to help you thrive through challenges. If this resonates with you, make sure you subscribe, follow, and share this podcast with someone who could use it too. It only takes a second, but it would mean the world to us, and it keeps you plugged in to fresh inspiration.